All right, let's get to our debate for tonight. And this would be an interesting one because we haven't prepared anything specifically. I think we have some general ideas, but I did ask Richard and maybe a tag team of Larry and Angel and others to tilt a little bit on this concept of what is happening in Iran. And we certainly know that facts on the ground changed. We put this together here. I expected it was 7:35. That's 8:35, and we've passed the witching hour, and something would have been happening while we were on the phone. I don't think that's going to happen, thank God. But to you first, Richard, if you could articulate the notion of Principle 2 and get us started off on an honest, heal the divide debate over the war in Iran.
Yeah, well, I think Principle 2 speaks for itself. It says that we're united as a party in agreeing that we put an end to U.S. acts of war and interference in the internal affairs of other nations, and that we should abide by international law. That means no aggressive acts of war. It doesn't matter whether our people in our government think that the people of Iran are being unduly oppressed. There's oppression all over the world, including many countries that call themselves U.S. allies, including in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, etc. There are human rights violations at lots of places. But the fact is, that is not an excuse to invade another country. You cannot bring about a democratic civil society at the point of a gun or at the blunt end of a bomb. It doesn't work that way. History shows that does not work. And these wars are illegal. They violate the UN Charter. They violate the Nuremberg Charter. They violate the Kellogg-Briand Treaty. They violate our own Constitution, since treaties to which the United States is a party is part of the supreme law of the land. There was also the violation of the Constitution that occurred then when one man, the President of the United States, committed this nation to a war that's now costing us over $1 billion a day, right? How is that consistent and consonant with having a constitutional democratic republic, right? Where in our constitutional scheme, where Congress has the sole authority to declare war, he just went ahead and did it. And this goes to the heart of the reason why we need a new political party in this country, because we already have two war parties. We need a peace party, a party that is going to stand up against the forever wars. We don't have that now. Look, you know, the Democrats, they're making a little bit of noise, but they are not stopping it, right? They didn't even want to, most of them didn't even support a vote on the War Powers Resolution, let alone take any action to cut off funding for this illegal war. The war, in my view, has been a complete unmitigated disaster from its inception to its execution. In addition to the fact that the war itself was illegal, they're committing all kinds of war crimes and bragging about it. How we're going to bomb them back to the Stone Age, how we're going to wipe out their civilization. They've attacked historic sites. They've attacked pharmaceutical facilities. They've attacked water, roads and bridges and hospitals and schools. They killed those over 200 schoolgirls. How is that helping the people of Iran rise up to create, against the regime? What it's actually doing is the exact opposite. It is rallying the people around the current regime, which you would expect whenever a foreign adversary attacks your country. That's what happens. That's what history shows over and over again. And that's not even getting into the economic and the ecological impacts of this war. It has been a complete and total disaster. And we need people in Congress that are going to be willing to stand up and say, no, you cannot do this, Mr. President. You cannot commit this nation to a disastrous war just based on your say-so, based on your executive orders. That's not constitutional. It's in violation of international law. And we need people ready and able to stand up and stop it, which is why this project of the Independence Party and this campaign to get Gary and Alejandro on the ballot so that we can start electing people to Congress who are going to stand up against the two war parties, we can finally start to make some progress there.
Well, in terms of an opening statement, I would say, first of all, that with respect to the constitutionality of the war, the legality, there is unfortunately a surprisingly easy answer to that. Namely, Trump did not declare war on Iran. He may have committed acts of war, but he did not declare war. And the Constitution says only Congress can declare war. So that's a technicality, but it is in fact an answer. It might not be a complete answer, but it is an answer. The other thing that comes to mind is a phrase from aviation, which I learned when I was training to be a pilot, and that is situational awareness. If a pilot loses situational awareness, he doesn't know up from down, left from right, or anything like that. Gets lost in a fog, can wind up going into what's called a graveyard spin and crashing, or he might slam right into the side of a mountain. As a matter of fact, I know somebody who goes to a church where that happened to one of their members. He was a pilot. He got lost in a fog and he slammed into a mountain in Colorado. If we're going to focus on anything, we should focus on the fact that, as I believe I've said before, most Christians and Jews are of the opinion that they cannot, by their actions here on earth, change the timing of the coming of their Messiah. The Islamists have what they call the Mahdi, which means the rightly guided one. That's the one they're looking for. They, by contrast, believe that they can change the timing of his coming and speed up his coming. And they believe the first and foremost way to do that is to produce global chaos. Now, these are the people who border on the Strait of Hormuz, and they want a nuclear bomb, and there's something wrong with that formula. As I've told people before, if you look out your window and you see the 4-year-old kid who lives next door to you walking down the street carrying a can of gasoline and a book of matches in his hand, you don't just do nothing. You go out there and you take the can of gasoline and book of matches away from him. Same thing holds true if at the house on the other side of you, out in the backyard, you see that the dog has suddenly developed rabies. You don't just do nothing about it simply because he hasn't attacked you yet. You take him, you put a rope around his neck, take him out in the yard and shoot him. There's nothing you can do with a dog that has rabies. So when we're talking about people who chant death to America, America is the great Satan. And they believe they can change the timing of the arrival of their Messiah. I'm thinking to myself, these people are going to be of the opinion that they have a religious duty to speed up the arrival of their Messiah. And they know what their teaching says about how to do that, produce global chaos. So in light of everything that regime has done in terms of terrorism, I can't help but say that, no, I'm not going to let that 4-year-old kid keep walking on down the street with a can of gasoline and a book of matches. Now, I wish that there was something that could be done about this that would be more simple. But, with respect to the war producing tragic results, wars produce war. They produce acts of war. So we've done a lot of things to a number of people in Iran that are horrible. But it does bring to mind Hamburg from July of 1943. The U.S. and Royal Air Force conducted a firebomb raid on Hamburg. We toasted the city. Same thing happened again in February of 45 at Dresden. We did a firebomb raid on Dresden, and the streets caught on fire. That's how hot it got. And bricks melted. But, I'm afraid that's war. So, how can you, it was General Sherman who once said, you cannot make war any better. You can only do it as quickly as possible to get it over with because it is so horrible.
Johnny, since you've broken the hand raising, you, as well as the foot, you get the first response. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, Larry, you just said that it's not war, and then just moments ago you said it is war. So which is it? The quote is, you said that, the children, all that, the fodder, what happens in war. You literally said that that's war because these things happen in war, but previously you had said that it's not a war. So which is it, dude?
I'm not saying, I did not say that it's not a war. I did say that Trump did not declare war. He committed acts of war, but he didn't declare war. The Constitution only says that only Congress can declare war, but he didn't declare war. He just went in and committed acts of war.
Yeah, but nobody really cares about the constitutionality. The fact is, it's war, and we're against war. Like, this party is against war. So,
Okay.
I mean, like, I understand. Like, I support Israel very much. I believe they have the right to defend themselves. They have their own money. They have their weapons. We don't have to support them in their crusade. They can support themselves.
If we can hone in, Michael, on this question of, since Johnny broke it, is this really Israel or is this the United States? I know you have a particular lane to go on, and let's tighten that and go down that path just a little bit.
Well, for one, I think people get injured often because people are arguing about legalities and semantics about what exact words are required to be used and interpretations. As far as Iran chanting death to America, death to Israel, they did that in the 1980s. And then our government, through Ollie North and Reagan losing his mind and having dementia, sold arms through the Israelis and Saudis, Mashagi, to Iran, which is really bizarre that they hated us so much that they took weapons from us, which makes me think that they say that for their people, but they don't really believe it. In fact, they like power more than they have a belief in their so-called interpretation of their religion. Also, in terms of when it's brought up that they've been engaged in terrorist activities for 47 years, I would challenge people to look up who has killed the most American sailors since World War II. And I wish we were at war with that country and removing that leader instead, because that would be, of course, Israel.
That's incendiary and in metaphorical and figurative ways. What do you mean? Can you give some examples of that? Seems surprising.
The U.S. liberty, that was the one country attacking American sailors. The most that have been killed since World War II was when Israel attacked the USS Liberty.
The way Larry said that the president didn't declare war because he's not allowed to, that means he's not allowed to go commit acts of war either. He's not, Congress declaring war, which is their constitutional prerogative, is the permission slip for the president to be able to do acts of war. So you can't do one without the other. So that was just a point I was going to bring up.
Well, you can say that it means that he can't commit acts of war. You can make an argument in support of that, but that doesn't mean that the text of the Constitution only speaks to declaring war. And so, I mean, you can make an argument that it's not unconstitutional on the basis of a technicality, but of such technicalities is the law itself made.
I think you're stretching it too far there, because committing acts of war without a formal declaration is still declaring war. You're declaring war with your actions, not with your words. So that's the way
You
I
can argue that point. You can argue that point. I'm not going to suggest that you can't. I'm just saying that if you have, the text that says one thing and your actions are not quite hitting the nail on the head, you can make the argument that it's just not within the scope of the text of the Constitution. It's a thin argument, but
I think
it's
you
there.
sound like Bill Clinton trying to define what the word is means.
Well,
maybe so, but he did actually avoid impeachment, I think, at some level.
There's a difference between a technicality and sophistry, and that's what we're dealing with here is sophistry. This is just trying to excuse something that's clearly impermissible by the Constitution, as understood by the framers, as articulated by James Madison so many times, George Washington as well, as I put in the Substack article I wrote about a month ago, want to really stop the forever wars. So I would refer folks to that as well as other writings. I think it's very clear. Larry talked about producing global chaos. Oh my God, who's producing global chaos now? It was the United States that actually committed the attack. Iran hadn't done anything. Iran hadn't attacked the United States. And what has actually happened is, despite its fatwa against developing nuclear weapons, now it's being given much more incentive to seek nuclear weapons because it has been attacked. It was already under threat by its neighbor that has nuclear weapons, which everybody knows, although it coyly tries to pretend it doesn't, namely Israel. So it has incentive to create a nuclear weapon. It was abiding by the treaty before Trump won, got rid of that, jettisoned that treaty. And both times the United States has attacked Iran, it was in the midst of negotiations where the official story was, hey, we're making great progress. Then the United States turns around and attacks right in the middle of it. That's a disaster. The Straits of Hormuz were functioning just fine until the United States attacked. And now it turns around and says, oh, well, we need to continue the war in order to reopen the Straits of Hormuz. What kind of sense does that make? And, that's not even getting into the economic impact of this war. Over $1 billion a day in direct costs, what we're paying at the pump, the destruction of oil producing facilities that are going to take years to repair. All of this is a result of Trump's act of aggression. Iran did not commit any act of aggression here.
Go ahead, Larry. I think it's important to respond.
Yeah. All right. I'll take us back to Tuesday, November the 6th, 1979, a date I remember quite well. That was 2 days after the Iranian hostage crisis began. The hostage crisis began when a bunch of students took over our embassy. It was on Tuesday that the Iranian government announced that they weren't going to do anything about it. They were just going to let them sit there and occupy our embassy and keep our embassy staff as hostages. That was an act of war, and we still don't have that. We still don't have that resolved. And we have the killing of our Marines in the barracks in Beirut, Lebanon, in 1981 or 82, that's. They started this in 1979.
So
you're saying that it's justified to have a counterattack 47 years later? I mean, how does that even make sense? And that was not an act of war. And by the way, that was in response to the United States spending millions of dollars to maintain a dictatorship in Iran, overthrowing the democratically elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953, putting the Shah in power. That's that queen that Angel was talking about earlier, the direct line of throne. So the United States imposed a monarchy on another country after overthrowing a democracy because it wanted to nationalize their oil resources, which is what this is ultimately really about. And it was in response to that we had the revolution in 1979. And the rule of the Shah was notorious for its human rights violations, for torture, for picking people up in the street, for unlawful imprisonment. That's what the people of Iran rebelled against in 1979. And they did it because the United States had been spending hundreds of millions of dollars to keep a dictatorship in power against the will of the people.
Oh, I'm wondering what the imminent threat was, and are we under an imminent threat now? And is there something I should do? Should I not go in crowded spaces? Like if somebody were they going to set off some kind of nuclear device on a backpack or something that JD Vance had suggested? What's the imminent threat that demanded this? And no, I don't trust the government because of Gulf of Tonkin, WMDs in Iraq, and there's absolutely zero reason for any American to trust the government. And even going off, to me, Trump's statements in the past or currently, like on Easter Sunday when he told them to open and I will abbreviate it, the effing strait that was open before all of this. I'm concerned about the imminent threat because I don't know if I shouldn't sleep at night still, or have we taken care of that? And what is the objective, I guess? And he also didn't go to the American people on any of this, which would be my argument for whether he was able to do this without congressional votes in terms of this. You should, because you put those people on record saying yes or no, because they can all throw this back currently and say, oh, this was all Trump. And that's very convenient for a lame duck president.
This one was particularly compelling. I've had a 5-day discussion with Rick Nelson. I actually invited him tonight to see if he goes. Look, he started with, I served 26 years. I did this. Stop embarrassing yourself because you're a coward. Now, that was 5 days ago. As Rick and I went through, I don't know which one came first. No, there's no embarrassment here. It's honor for you. Opinions are relevant. Tell me why you do this. Do you just have blind obedience? And then he came back and back and forth and back and forth. What's interesting is I didn't convert Rick to my point of view, but we had an honest, forthright discussion about this. And he comes back and said, look, I was in Japan and this is what it is. And then we talk about what Mike talked about, well, what about Beirut? What about all of these things back and forth and back and forth? This kind of engagement I've found to be incredibly, incredibly helpful practice for when I do text message, P2P, all the other stuff here. I would encourage you guys, not because what I'm writing is particularly interesting, but just the notion of the back and forth with people, whether it's on social or whether it's on text, if it's done well and correctly, is probably one of the most powerful things you can do as a volunteer.
What I will say is, I think it's clear based off of people's actions, right? And certain things that they say that we hold them accountable. So obviously with Trump, I think he's a puppet, right? He's not doing what's in the best interest of the American people. Obviously RFK Jr.'s comment was alarming, right? So that I was not expecting that. And then Tulsi Gabbard, she was quiet for a long time, and all of a sudden she's kind of going along with the status quo too. So it's like, at some point, it's like you can't give people the benefit of the doubt anymore, right? And I tried, but yeah, no.